Who could imagine that a millionaire would ruin his own wedding on purpose, only to find salvation in the most unexpected place? Not in the ballroom of crystal chandeliers, but in the kitchen of dirty dishes. One reckless decision, one hidden corner, and one poor girl's words would change the course of his life forever. Before we dive into the story, comment below where you're watching from. Enjoy the story, everyone. The chandeliers sparkled as if the sky itself had descended into the ballroom. White lilies filled every corner. Musicians played melodies rehearsed to perfection, and waiters moved like an army in black and white. On the surface, it was the wedding of the year, the union of two powerful families, one deal sealed not by signatures, but by vows. And yet, sitting at the grand table, the groom felt nothing but emptiness. Adrian Kingsley, the name that appeared in every financial magazine, the face that investors admired and envied. A man who built empires with cold precision, who could calculate risk and profit with terrifying ease. But tonight, as his bride smiled beside him for the cameras, he felt like a guest at his own funeral. Every cheer from the guests echoed hollow in his chest. Every congratulatory handshake felt like a chain tightening around his wrists. His bride, elegant, beautiful, the daughter of his father's business partner, was speaking politely with the governor at the next table, her smile so rehearsed it looked carved in porcelain. She never glanced at him, not once with warmth, and he didn't expect her to. This marriage wasn't about love. It was about mergers. As the cameras flashed, Adrian's mind whispered cruelly, "This is not your life. This is their life." He raised his glass, pretending to toast, and inside he counted the years of this golden prison. He could see them stretch endlessly, one after another, without laughter, without choice. The music swelled. Guests clapped. His bride leaned in, whispering, "Smile, Adrian. Everyone's watching." And so he did. A practiced smile sharp enough to cut glass. He looked like the perfect groom, the perfect son, the perfect asset in this show of wealth. But inside, something cracked. Because just before the ceremony, alone in the dressing room, Adrian had stood before the mirror and whispered to himself, "If I do this, I'll never be free again." That voice hadn't left him. It grew louder with every passing minute, louder than the orchestra, louder than the polite laughter echoing around him. He felt like a man watching his own body move, while his soul pounded against invisible walls. And then it happened. A waiter tripped near the table, a single glass of red wine wobbling dangerously. Without thinking, Adrian reached, caught it, and then, in a deliberate motion, tipped it over himself. Crimson liquid spread across his crisp white shirt like spilled blood. Gasps filled the room. His bride's eyes flashed with fury. "What are you doing?" she hissed. Adrian stood, calmly, deliberately, ruining the picture. His voice was low, but sharp enough that those nearest heard. The murmurs began. Cameras turned. The bride's father rose in anger, but Adrian didn't stay to explain. He walked out, his footsteps echoing louder than the music behind him. Through the doors, down the hallway lined with servants, further and further away from the suffocating perfection. He kept walking until the chandeliers disappeared, until the marble floors gave way to cement, until silence was broken not by violins but by clattering pans and the hiss of boiling water. The kitchen. And there, amid chaos and steam, stood a girl with sleeves rolled to her elbows, hair tied back messily, scrubbing trays with tired hands. She looked up at him, confused, a drop of soap on her cheek. She tilted her head, her lips curving in an almost amused smile. "You look," she said, "like a groom who just escaped." For the first time in years, Adrian laughed. A quiet, raw sound, as if he hadn't remembered how. And in that moment, surrounded by noise, dishes, and the scent of soap instead of roses. Something real began. Adrian leaned against the counter, his expensive suit ruined by wine, his cufflinks glinting under the harsh fluorescent lights. The girl returned her attention to the mountain of dishes, as if a runaway groom was the most ordinary sight in the world. "You're not even going to ask what happened?" he said, still half smiling from her earlier remark. She shrugged. "Does it matter? You're here, not there. That says enough." He blinked, taken aback. People usually demanded explanations from him, details, polished answers. She didn't even look at him. She just kept scrubbing. It was oddly liberating. "You're right," he admitted. "I escaped." Finally, she glanced at him, her eyes quick and sharp. "Escaped? That's a funny word for someone who probably has everything." Adrian chuckled softly. "You think I have everything? Look at you," she said, nodding at his cufflinks. "Those things alone probably cost more than my rent. And you're complaining about what? Too many flowers at your party." Her sarcasm should have stung, but instead it warmed him. He hadn't spoken to someone without calculation, without filters, in years. "It wasn't a party," he said. "It was a cage, with better catering." That made her laugh. A genuine, ringing laugh that bounced off the steel counters and pots around them. He found himself staring, realizing he couldn't remember the last time a woman's laughter felt like oxygen. "And what's wrong with cages lined with gold?" she teased, turning back to rinse another tray. He paused. His answer came quieter, almost a confession. "Because you're still a prisoner." The girl stopped for a moment. Her hands trembled slightly in the water, but she quickly masked it with a smirk. "Well, better a poor dishwasher in a free life than a prince locked in someone else's castle." Her words cut deeper than she knew. He felt them settle in his chest like truth he'd been avoiding all his life. For a moment, silence hung between them. The sounds of the kitchen, sizzling pans, orders being shouted, glasses clinking, filled the air. Yet in that corner, time slowed. Adrian straightened, suddenly aware of how ridiculous he looked, drenched in red wine among dirty trays. But she didn't mock him. She didn't ask for his name. She simply treated him as human. "What's your name?" he asked finally. "Does it matter?" she answered quickly, a mischievous glint in her eyes. "You'll go back upstairs soon. People like you don't stay in kitchens." But instead of walking away, Adrian smiled. Not the polite mask he wore in boardrooms, but a real smile. "Maybe tonight I will." Her hands stilled. For the first time, she looked at him not with curiosity, not with sarcasm, but with something softer, as if she wasn't sure whether to believe him. And in that hesitation, in that fragile space, the spark of something new flickered to life. The kitchen door slammed open with a force that made even the cooks freeze. A wave of perfume, silk, and fury swept into the room. His bride, immaculate in her shimmering gown, stood framed in the doorway, her eyes narrowing at the sight before her. Adrian, leaning casually against the counter, talking to a dishwasher girl with soap still clinging to her fingers. "Adrian!" Her voice sliced through the air like broken glass. "What is this?" The chatter of the staff died instantly. Pots stopped clattering. Even the steam seemed to hold its breath. All eyes shifted from the millionaire groom to the poor girl with wet sleeves. Adrian straightened, but his calm didn't break. "This," he said evenly, "is the first honest conversation I've had all evening." The bride's painted lips curled. With her, she jabbed a manicured finger toward the girl, who froze in place, soap dripping from her hands. "Do you have any idea what this looks like? My father's guests are asking where you are, and here you are lowering yourself to..." She paused, letting the insult drip like poison. To the help. The girl's face flushed crimson. She opened her mouth to speak, then shut it quickly, her eyes dropping to the floor. She had endured insults before, but never in front of so many eyes, never with such venom. Adrian's jaw tightened. He glanced at the trembling hands of the girl, at the humiliation burning in her cheeks. Something inside him snapped. "I don't think you understand," he said slowly, each word sharp. "She isn't the one lowering me. If anything, she's the only one tonight who's reminded me I'm human." Gasps rippled through the kitchen. The bride's face hardened, shock flaring into rage. "Are you out of your mind? Do you realize what you're throwing away? The partnership, the contracts, the future." Adrian cut her off, his voice suddenly fierce. "The future? You mean the prison you and my father built? The one where I smile on command and marry a stranger so your family can add another zero to your empire? That's not my future. Not anymore." Silence crashed over the room. The bride's father had appeared at the door now, his expression thunderous, his presence looming. But Adrian didn't flinch. He turned to the girl, his voice gentler. "You don't belong in her humiliation, and I don't belong in her life." The bride's voice rose, shrill and desperate. "Adrian, if you walk out that door." He didn't let her finish. Without another glance at her, Adrian slipped off his cufflinks and dropped them onto the counter with a metallic clang, a symbol of the cage he was leaving behind. Then, with quiet finality, he said, "Then I'll finally be free." And he walked out, past the furious bride, past the gaping father, past the stunned silence of the staff. The girl stood rooted, her heart pounding as if the walls themselves had shifted. She had seen a man shatter a golden world with a single choice. And in the ruins of that decision, something new was waiting to be born. The night air hit Adrian like a shock of reality as he stepped outside. The roar of the ballroom faded behind the thick walls, replaced by the hum of the city, the muffled sound of traffic, the cool silence of freedom. For the first time in years, he wasn't following a script. For the first time, his life was his own. But freedom had a bitter edge. He had left the cage, yes, but in that cage remained his name, his fortune, his family's approval. And perhaps most painful of all, he had left her, the girl with soap-stained hands and words sharp enough to cut through his chains. He thought of her face when the bride had humiliated her, the way she had tried to shrink into herself, as if she could disappear. The memory burned in him like a brand. He couldn't let their meeting end like that. Days passed. The press feasted on the scandal. Millionaire groom walks out of wedding. Partnership in jeopardy. Adrian ignored it all. For once, the headlines didn't matter. What mattered was finding her. But he didn't even know her name. He returned to the banquet hall the next day, slipping through the back where the staff worked. The manager, wary of the scandal, told him the girl was gone. She only worked temporary shifts, needed the money, disappeared after that night. Adrian's jaw clenched. He had to keep looking. Took 3 more days of searching. Finally, one evening, walking down a quieter street, he saw her. She was behind the counter of a small, dim cafe, her hair tucked behind her ears, serving coffee to tired workers. No ball gowns, no chandeliers, just the hum of an old espresso machine. For a moment, he simply stood there, watching her. She looked so ordinary, and yet to him, she was the most extraordinary thing he had seen in years. He stepped inside. The bell above the door jingled, and she turned. Their eyes met, and her body stiffened in shock. "You," she whispered. Adrian managed a small, awkward smile. "Me." She crossed her arms, defensive. "What are you doing here?" "Looking for another kitchen to escape to." Her tone was sharp, but beneath it he caught a flicker of something else. Fear, maybe, or the memory of that night. "I'm looking for you," he said simply. Her breath caught. For a long moment, neither spoke. The noise of the cafe seemed to vanish, leaving only the tension between them. "Why?" she asked finally, her voice barely above a whisper. He hesitated, then told the truth. "Because you said one sentence that destroyed the life I thought I had to live. And because I don't want that night to be the last time I see you." She stared at him, searching his face for lies, but there were none. For once, Adrian Kingsley, the man the world thought unshakable, looked vulnerable. Slowly, almost against her will, the corner of her lips curved into the faintest smile. "Well," she murmured, "you ruined your wedding. Don't ruin my cafe too." Adrian laughed softly, the sound low and unguarded. He pulled out a chair at one of the small tables. "Then maybe let me stay, so I don't make a mess again." And as she brought him a cup of coffee, plain, bitter, nothing like the vintage wines of his old world, Adrian knew this was the first drink of his life that actually tasted like freedom. Adrian returned to the cafe the next evening, and the one after that. At first she didn't understand why a man like him would keep coming back for cheap coffee and stale muffins. He could buy entire restaurants, yet here he sat at the corner table, watching her with a look that unsettled her more than she cared to admit. One night, when the cafe was nearly empty, she slid into the seat across from him, arms folded. "You don't belong here," she said. "Maybe this is the first place I actually belong," Adrian replied softly. Her brows furrowed. "Why me? You don't even know me." "I know enough," he said. "You're the only person who's told me the truth in years." The words hung between them, heavy and real. She looked away, uncomfortable. She had spent her life invisible, working shifts no one noticed, cleaning up after people who didn't even learn her name. And now here was a man the world admired, saying he saw her. It scared her more than she wanted to admit. The following weekend, Adrian appeared again, this time with no suit, no tie, just a plain shirt, his sleeves rolled, his hair slightly mussed. He looked less like the man in magazines and more like someone real. "Come with me," he said. "Where?" she asked warily. "Somewhere without chandeliers." She hesitated, then followed him. And so began their secret evenings. He took her on simple walks through the park, where the lamps glowed dimly and children laughed in the distance. He bought them pastries from a street vendor, awkwardly holding the greasy bag as if it were a priceless treasure. She laughed when powdered sugar stuck to his lip. "Don't tell me this is better than champagne," she teased. "It is," he admitted. "At least this has flavor." She didn't realize it, but every laugh she gave, every casual word, chipped away at the walls around him. He started to breathe differently, less like a man on guard, more like someone rediscovering the taste of life. One night, they stumbled upon an outdoor movie screening in a square. Families sat on blankets, children whispered in excitement, couples leaned close. Adrian paused, unsure, but she tugged his sleeve. "Come on." They sat on the pavement, sharing a paper bag of popcorn. When the old projector flickered and the film began, Adrian looked around. No press, no expectations, just people. And her. "This is ridiculous," he whispered. "And perfect." She grinned. "See? Told you. Life doesn't need to be gilded." For a long while he didn't watch the film. He watched her, her face lit by the flickering light, her eyes wide with wonder. And he thought, this is what I was missing. Not wealth, not deals. This. When the credits rolled and the crowd began to disperse, she stretched her arms, sighing. "Well, Mr. Runaway Groom, I hope you don't regret ruining your wedding for this. He turned to her, voice low but certain. It's the only decision I don't regret. Her breath caught, and in that fragile silence, something deeper took root. Their secret meetings lasted for weeks. For the first time in his life, Adrian felt like an ordinary man. Not a headline, not a polished figure in an expensive suit, but simply a man sitting with a girl on a park bench, drinking hot coffee from a paper cup. She, in turn, was learning how to trust again. At first, she kept her distance, reminding herself that this couldn't last, that he would leave once he grew tired of her simple world. But instead, he showed up every day, and every time he did, the weight in her chest grew heavier. But the world didn't forget. The press never let go of a scandal. Newspapers screamed, "Kingsley leaves heiress at the altar. Mysterious reason behind ruined wedding." Paparazzi camped outside his office. Journalists stalked him through the streets. And one evening, as they sat together in the small cafe, the door opened, and a storm of camera flashes lit up the room. The girl flinched. "Who are they?" Adrian's eyes darkened. "Vultures. And now they know you exist." The next day, the headlines shifted. Runaway groom seen with unknown woman. The photo was grainy, but clear enough to capture her silhouette beside him. Her phone began to ring nonstop. The cafe owner warned her, "If this hurts business, I can't keep you here." She nodded silently, her hands trembling. When Adrian arrived that evening, she was already waiting with a small bag packed. Her eyes were swollen from crying, but her voice was cold. "This can't go on," she said. "Why not?" He stepped closer, but she pulled away. "Look at me, Adrian. I'm nobody. I have no money, no power. I work 2 jobs just to support my brother. And now your past, your name. It's tearing apart the only life I have. I've already lost this job. Tomorrow, maybe it'll be our apartment. I can't carry this weight." His chest tightened. "Then let me help you." She shook her head. "You don't understand. If I accept your help, I stop being me. I'll become just another one of your transactions. Another deal in your world. I don't want that. I want to stay myself." He reached out, but she turned away, setting a small envelope on the table. Inside was a note, her handwriting steady but trembling. "I am not your world." Her eyes lifted one last time. "You deserve someone who can live in your reality. And I'm just a shadow who stumbled into it by accident." Before he could speak, she was gone. Adrian sat frozen, clutching the envelope in his hand. And for the first time, he realized that the freedom he had fought for now hurt more than the chains he had broken. Adrian's world collapsed into chaos. The press followed him relentlessly, cameras flashing every time he stepped outside. Board members whispered about instability. Investors demanded explanations. But none of it mattered compared to the silence that haunted him, the silence she left behind. He read her note every night. "I am not your world." The words cut deeper than any headline, deeper than any scandal. Because she was wrong. She had become his world. And now she was gone. His father was the first to strike. In the massive oak-paneled study, the elder Kingsley's voice thundered. "You've destroyed years of planning. Do you understand what you've cost us? That girl," he spat the word like poison, "she is nothing, and you've thrown away everything for her." Adrian stood tall, though his insides churned. "Maybe everything you value isn't what I need." His father slammed a fist on the desk. "You're humiliating this family. If you walk this path, you'll do it without my name, without my support, without the empire you were meant to inherit." For a long moment, Adrian said nothing. Then he quietly removed the watch his father had given him. The same one he wore at every board meeting, every deal, every step of the life that wasn't his. He set it on the desk. Then I'll walk it alone, he said. The press only grew bolder. Headlines screamed, Kingsley heir at war with his father. Paparazzi shouted questions about the mystery girl. Adrian ignored them all. None of their noise mattered. But alone in his penthouse, surrounded by silence, he realized that money and power felt like ashes without her laughter, her sarcasm, her truth. One evening, desperate, he went back to the cafe. It was closed. The windows were dark. He asked around, but no one knew where she'd gone. Each answer felt like a door slamming shut. He returned night after night, hoping, waiting. Nothing. Until one rainy afternoon, he caught sight of her by accident. She was in a quiet neighborhood, stepping out of a small library with a stack of children's books in her arms. She looked different without her apron or her cafe uniform. Softer, calmer, surrounded by a group of kids tugging at her sleeves. She smiled at them, her face lighting up in a way he had never seen before. And in that moment, Adrian understood. She didn't belong to his world of chandeliers and contracts. She belonged to this, the simple, unguarded light she gave so freely. He stood in the rain, watching her from a distance, torn between walking away and stepping closer. His entire life balanced on the edge of that choice. And for the first time, he knew he couldn't go back to who he had been. Not without her. Adrian stood frozen in the rain, watching her laugh with the children outside the small library. She looked so different here. No soap-stained apron, no weary posture from long shifts, but alive, radiant in her element. He had ruined a wedding, defied his father, lost his place in the empire, and still, none of it hurt as much as losing her. He took a step forward, then another until the children noticed him. Their giggles drew her gaze, and when she looked up, the smile slipped from her face. "You shouldn't be here," she said softly, clutching the books against her chest. "Maybe this," he gestured around them, his hair soaked, his suit clinging to him in the rain, "is exactly where I should be." She shook her head, trying to steady her voice. "Adrian, I told you, I don't belong in your world. I can't survive under the weight of your name, your money, your headlines." He stepped closer, his eyes holding hers. "Then I'll leave that world behind. Don't you see? I already have." Her lips parted, but no words came. He reached into his pocket, pulling out the crumpled note she had left him. The ink was smudged from nights he had unfolded it again and again. "You wrote, 'I am not your world.'" His voice broke slightly. "But you are. Not the empire, not the contracts, not the parties. You're the only thing that feels real." The children had scattered back inside, leaving them alone in the rain. She searched his face, looking for a lie, some trace of the man who once sat at a table like a prisoner in a golden cage. But all she saw was truth, raw, stripped of arrogance, trembling with something he hadn't dared to show anyone else. Slowly, her defenses began to melt. The books slipped slightly in her arms. "And if you lose everything for me?" she whispered. He smiled, not the cold, calculated smile of a millionaire, but the tender smile of a man finally free. "Then I'll finally have something worth keeping." For a long moment, neither moved. Then, with a breath that felt like surrender, she let the books fall into the puddles and stepped into his arms. The rain soaked them both, but neither cared. He held her tightly, as if anchoring himself to the only truth left in his life. She buried her face in his chest, whispering, "You're impossible. And you," he murmured into her hair, "are the only reason I'm alive." The storm eased into silence, and in that quiet, they both knew. Their worlds had collided, not to destroy each other, but to build something new. A life not defined by money or chains, but by the simplest, most priceless thing of all, love.